There is a moment in Genesis where an old man, nearly blind, gathers his sons around his bed and begins to speak. And what comes out of his mouth is not just a farewell. Every word he says over each son will ripple forward for thousands of years, shaping nations, producing kings, and placing names on the gates of a city that has not been built yet. That is where we are going today. And by the time we get to the end of this, you are going to see something about the tribe that gets erased from Revelation that almost nobody talks about. Keep that in the back of your mind. So here is what this video is. We are going to walk through every single tribe of Israel, one by one, and show you what each one actually reveals about how God works. Not just history, not just a list to memorize. The names, the mothers, the blessings, the failures, and the threads that connect Genesis all the way to the last pages of the Bible. Most people treat the 12 tribes like a trivia question. They are not. They are a story, and every piece of it fits together. The story does not start with a king or a nation. It starts with a marriage nobody wanted. Jacob, the man whose family would become Israel, loved Rachel. He worked 7 years for her. But on the wedding night, her father Laban switched the sisters, and Jacob woke up married to Leah. That one moment of betrayal is the crack in the foundation out of which an entire nation grows. Because every tribe that follows is born from that household, from that rivalry, from those desperate prayers. The names are not labels. They are the prayers of women who felt unseen. Leah goes first. Her firstborn is Reuben, in Hebrew, Reuven, from Ra'ah, meaning to see, and Ben, meaning son. Genesis 29:32 records her exact words. The Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. The very first tribe of Israel is named after a woman's longing to be noticed. That is the foundation. Not a military conquest, not a royal bloodline. A woman nobody chose, and a God who chose her anyway. Reuben, though, does not hold that position of honor. He is the firstborn, which in ancient culture meant everything. The birthright, the double portion, the leadership. But Genesis 35 records that Reuben sleeps with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Jacob does not forget it. On his deathbed in Genesis 49, he says over Reuben, "Unstable as water, you shall not excel." The tribe named I was seen becomes the tribe that could not hold its place. The firstborn who forfeited everything. And that matters because the position of the firstborn does not disappear. It just gets transferred. Remember that, because we will come back to it. Then comes Simeon, Shimon, from Shama, meaning to hear. Genesis 29:33. Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. God saw, then God heard. The first two tribes are a testimony that God pays attention to the people nobody else notices. But Simeon's history is complicated. He and his brother Levi take justice into their own hands in Genesis 34, slaughtering an entire city after their sister Dinah is violated. Jacob's deathbed blessing over Simeon is not a blessing at all. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And that is exactly what happens. Simeon is eventually absorbed by Judah. The tribe named God Heard Me ends up with no territory of its own, scattered and absorbed into another tribe. It is a sobering picture of what happens when righteous anger becomes unrestrained violence. The third son is Levi, from lava, meaning to be joined or attached. Genesis 29:34. Now this time my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Leah is still reaching for Jacob's love, but the irony is stunning. Because Levi's descendants, among whom were Moses and Aaron, became the priests and temple functionaries, dispersed among the other tribes and receiving no tribal land of their own. Leah wanted to be attached to a husband. God turned that longing into attachment to himself. The tribe of Levi becomes the tribe that stands between God and the people, carrying the ark, running the tabernacle, serving at the altar. The tribe of Levi carried the priestly line, and God chose not to number them along with the other tribes. They belonged to him alone. And then Judah, Yehuda from Yada, meaning to praise. Genesis 29:35. This time I will praise the Lord. Something shifts in Leah at this moment. The first three names are about pain. The fourth is about praise. And it is from Judah that the royal line descends. King David came from Judah. And Revelation 5:5 calls Jesus the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. The Messiah comes from the moment a rejected woman stopped asking for love and started giving thanks. Now step back and look at what just happened in four names. God sees me. God hears me. God is attached to me. I will praise God. Read in order. Leah's first four sons tell a complete story. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern embedded in the foundation of the nation. Now we move to the maidservants. Rachel, who cannot conceive, gives her servant Bilhah to Jacob. Bilhah bears Dan. Dan comes from the root din, meaning to judge. Genesis 36. God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Dan means justice, and his tribe would later produce Samson, one of the most famous judges in Israel's history, recorded in Judges chapters 13 through 16. But here is where Dan gets complicated, and this is the thread I want you to hold on to, because it pays off at the very end of this video. Jacob's deathbed prophecy over Dan in Genesis 49 is unsettling. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider shall fall backward. That is not a comfortable blessing, and the tribe's history matches that unease. The tribe of Dan as a whole was guilty of gross idolatry, even to the point of stealing the idols they used to practice their religion. Theirs was the first organized idolatry in ancient Israel, and the longest in duration. It continued until the day of the captivity of the land, nearly 500 years later. And when the kingdom split, King Jeroboam placed one of his two golden calves in the city of Dan. The tribe named Justice became the tribe that refused to be judged. I am going to come back to Dan at the very end, because what happens to this tribe in Revelation is one of the most striking details in the entire Bible. Stay with me. After Dan comes Naphtali, from the root pathal, meaning to wrestle or struggle. Genesis 38. With great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed, born out of rivalry. But Naphtali's territory later settles in the northern region of Galilee, and that matters because Isaiah 9:1-2 prophesies over exactly that region. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Matthew 4:13-16 applies that prophecy directly to Jesus, beginning his public ministry in Galilee, in the territory of Naphtali. The tribe born from a wrestling match became the region where the light of the world first appeared publicly. Now Leah's maidservant Zilpah enters the story. Her first son is Gad, meaning fortune, or a troop comes. Genesis 30:11. A troop comes. Short name, big reputation. The tribe of Gad later settled east of the Jordan River and became known for producing fierce warriors. 1 Chronicles 12:8 describes some Gadites who joined David in the wilderness as mighty men of valor, men trained for battle, whose faces were like the faces of lions. Zilpah's second son is Asher, from the word meaning happy or blessed. Genesis 30:13. I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. Jacob's prophecy over Asher in Genesis 49:20 says, bread from Asher shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties. Jacob prophesied that Asher's tribe would enjoy rich foods, and the tribe went on to possess a region of eastern Galilee still known for its olive groves. And centuries later, a woman from this tribe shows up in the New Testament. Luke 2:36-38 describes Anna, a prophetess from the tribe of Asher, a widow of about 84 years who never left the temple, serving God with fasting and prayers night and day. She had been waiting her whole life for the Messiah, and when she saw the infant Jesus, she recognized him. The tribe of happiness produced a woman whose joy was finally complete. Then Leah bears two more sons, Issachar, likely from Sakar, meaning reward or wages. Genesis 30:18, God has given me my wages. But Issachar's tribe later becomes known for something unexpected. First Chronicles 12:32 describes them as men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. The tribe named Reward became known for wisdom and discernment. They were the people who read the moment correctly when everyone else was confused. After Issachar comes Zebulun from Zaval, meaning to honor or to dwell with. Genesis 30:20. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons. Still hoping, still longing, Zebulun's territory in the land would later sit in the region of Galilee, and like Naphtali, Isaiah 9 speaks over that land. Naphtali and Zebulun are both mentioned by the prophet Isaiah in a promise given concerning the land of Galilee, two tribes born from the same longing, both pointing toward the same light. And then finally, Rachel conceives. After years of watching her sister bear child after child, Rachel gives birth to Joseph. Yosef from Yasef, meaning may he add. Genesis 30:24. The Lord shall add to me another son. Joseph is the son of the long wait, and his life will mirror that theme. Sold into slavery by his own brothers in Genesis 37, falsely accused in Genesis 39, imprisoned and forgotten in Genesis 40, and then, in God's timing, elevated to second in command over all of Egypt in Genesis 41. Joseph's story spans 14 chapters of Genesis, one of the most detailed narratives in the entire Bible. Jacob's deathbed blessing over Joseph is the longest of all 12. And here is where the tribal math gets interesting. Joseph's tribe was divided in two. Jacob adopted Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, essentially giving Joseph a double portion for his faithfulness in saving the family from famine. So Joseph does not become a single tribe, he becomes two. Ephraim from Perah, meaning to be fruitful, and Manasseh from Nasha, meaning to forget, because Genesis 41:51 records Joseph saying, God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of Joseph and an Egyptian woman named Asenath, which means Manasseh was half Jewish and half Gentile since his mother was Egyptian. And Jacob adopts both of them as his own, giving Joseph a double inheritance. Jacob's decision to put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh in his blessing was prophetic, as Ephraim indeed grew to be more prominent in political and military affairs. After the kingdom divides, the northern kingdom's capital is in Ephraim's territory, and the prophets sometimes refer to the entire nation as Ephraim. The tribe named Fruitful grows so large it becomes synonymous with the whole northern nation. But that prominence also comes with a shadow. Later prophets associate Ephraim with spiritual decline and idolatry, showing both blessing and warning. The most fruitful branch can also be the one that drifts the farthest. Manasseh, the firstborn of Joseph, represents something different. His name means forgetting, but not in the way we usually think about forgetting. It is the forgetting that comes after healing. Joseph names him that because God helped him release the bitterness of everything he had been through. Symbolically, Manasseh represents restoration, healing from the past, and new beginnings. His story reflects how God can transform suffering into blessing. Now we come to the last of Jacob's sons, the youngest, Benjamin. Rachel names him Ben-Oni at birth, meaning son of my sorrow, because she dies giving birth to him. But Jacob refuses that name and calls him Benjamin, Benjamin, meaning son of my right hand. The same child, two names, one spoken in grief, one spoken in honor. Jacob's deathbed blessing over Benjamin in Genesis 49:27 is striking. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, in the evening he divides the plunder. King Saul and Mordecai were among the most famous from this tribe, also known for standing against all of Israel during a civil war. Despite being one of the smallest tribes, Benjamin's warriors were renowned for their skill and courage in battle. And the tribe of Benjamin stays loyal. Benjamin and Judah make up the southern kingdom after the split. When the northern tribes fracture and eventually fall to Assyria, Benjamin holds. And the Apostle Paul, writing in Philippians 3, identifies himself as of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews. The smallest, fiercest tribe, still carrying its identity centuries after the exile. Now, before we get to the payoff, this is a good moment to stop and ask yourself, which of these tribes do you see yourself in? The overlooked one like Leah's sons? The one who wrestled like Naphtali? The one who waited like Joseph? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if this kind of deep biblical storytelling is what you are looking for, subscribe, because this is exactly what this channel is built for. There is a lot more where this came from. Now, let's talk about what happens to these tribes at the end of the story. After the kingdom splits, the nation of Israel divides into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom, called Israel, is made up of the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, and half the tribe of Manasseh. In 722 BCE, the kingdom of Israel falls to the Assyrians, and many of the Israelites are deported and scattered in foreign lands. These become what history calls the 10 lost tribes. 10 of the 12 tribes scattered, gone. Their identities absorbed into surrounding nations over centuries. Only 2 remain clearly traceable. Judah and Benjamin, the southern kingdom, survived the Assyrian conquest. They later face Babylon, go into exile, and return. And it is through that remnant that the line of the Messiah continues. But here is the thing that most people miss when they read the tribal lists. The number 12 never actually changes. Even when Levi is removed for priestly duty and Joseph is split into Ephraim and Manasseh, the count stays at 12. If one tribe were to withdraw from the union or be absorbed into another, the number 12 would be preserved, either by splitting one of the remaining tribes into 2 or by accepting a new tribe into the union. 12 is not just a head count, it is a structure, a covenant shape. And that structure shows up one final time in the book of Revelation. Now here is the payoff I promised you at the beginning. Revelation 7 lists the 144,000 servants of God sealed during the tribulation, 12,000 from each tribe. And when you read the list, something is wrong. Revelation 7:4-8 lists 144,000 sealed servants of God from 12 tribes of Israel. Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. For some reason, the tribe of Dan is not listed. In its place is Manasseh, one of the 2 tribes that came from Joseph. Dan is missing, the tribe named Justice, the tribe that produced Samson, the tribe whose name means to judge, gone from the final roll call. And the Bible does not give us an explicit reason, but the history of Dan makes the silence feel intentional. The tribe of Dan was guilty of gross idolatry, even to the point of stealing the idols they used to practice their religion. Theirs was the first organized idolatry in ancient Israel, and the longest in duration. Jewish tradition says that Dan was the first tribe to follow Jeroboam into his sin of idolatry, and in their literature, the term Dan is often used to represent idolatry itself. The tribe that was supposed to be about justice became the tribe that institutionalized injustice before God. And so in Revelation 7, when God seals his servants for the final chapter of history, Dan is not among them. But here is what makes this even more remarkable, and this is the part most people never hear. In Ezekiel's vision of the future land allotment, Dan appears again. Ezekiel 48 lists the tribal portions in the millennial kingdom, and Dan is there, given land, given a portion, restored. Revelation 7 is not teaching the eternal annihilation of Dan. It is teaching exclusion from that particular sealed company of 144,000. That is serious, but it is not the same as final hopeless rejection. Ezekiel shows that Dan's omission in Revelation 7 is severe, but not the end of the story. So what does Dan teach us? It teaches us that persistent unfaithfulness has real consequences, that the name you carry does not protect you from the fruit of your choices. But it also teaches us that God's mercy has a longer reach than our failure. Dan is excluded from the 144,000 and restored in Ezekiel. Both things are true at the same time. And that brings us back to Reuben. Remember the firstborn who forfeited his birthright? The double portion that should have been his gets transferred to Joseph, whose two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, each become full tribes. Joseph, despite being the second youngest son, received double the inheritance of his brothers, treated as if he were the firstborn son instead of Reuben. The position of honor does not disappear. It moves to the one who proved faithful in the pit, in the prison, and in the palace. So here is what we have actually been looking at this whole time. 12 tribes, 12 sons, 1 daughter, and 2 grandsons, all arranged and rearranged so the number stays at 12. Each name a prayer, each history a warning or a promise. Leah's sons telling the story of a soul moving from rejection to worship. The maidservant's sons producing warriors and prophets in the region where Jesus begins his ministry. Joseph's sons carrying the double portion and the memory of healing. Benjamin, the son of sorrow, renamed son of my right hand. And Dan, the tribe that started with justice and drifted so far from it that it disappears from the final sealed list, but reappears in Ezekiel's vision of what comes after. And then the names of those 12 tribes get written on the gates of the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21. Not as a history lesson, as an entrance, as the way in. God built a nation out of heartbreak, rivalry, and the prayers of women who felt unseen. He used a deceiver named Jacob, a rejected wife named Leah, a grieving mother named Rachel, and sons who were sometimes faithful and sometimes catastrophically not. And he wrote every name on the gates of the city where everything is finally made right.